Yeah, perfect.
Hey, we've got a problem here.
So, what's the plan?
What's your plan?
What are your plans?
What's the plan?
What's the plan?
What's your plan?
What's your plan of action?
Plan.
What's the plan?
So, what is the plan?
Wait, I have a plan.
I have a plan.
I have a plan.
That's the plan.
I have a plan here.
This plan's gonna work.
Master plan, phase 1, side A.
I love everything about your plan.
भाई इससे कहते हैं planning.
What's it say?
Well, it says, I love it when a plan comes together.
Hello everyone and welcome to Young Australians Plan for the Planet. I'm Jessie and I'm here with Ian, and today we're going to be running through a very exciting session coming to you live from Questacon. But before we get started today, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and custodians of the country, the Australian and Torres Strait Islander people, and our first innovators of this land. Today, we would like to especially recognise the elders of tomorrow. They are the future of this earth, and let us together join to respect and acknowledge all First Nations so that we may walk forward together. Okay, let's get started. So, Ian, what do we have in store for us today?
Well, we've just had the video on the plan, the Sustainable Development Goals plan. And what we're going to be talking about today is how we're going to build the plan for Australia sustainability. So it's an exciting day. We're just moving into what we call the third phase of the program. So we started out with research and orientation, getting everybody's heads around the ideas behind the Sustainable Development Goals and how they all fit together. The second stage, and everybody's done it absolutely brilliantly, Jessie, is build their discovery. Go out and explore what's happening in their region under each of the Sustainable Development Goals for their student focus area. So I've got an example of one of those today. We'll talk about how we're going to take each of those pieces, because each of those pieces are like the pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. So what we do when we build the plan is take each of the pieces that the students have developed, and we're going to assemble those into a national plan for sustainability for Australia out to 2050. Now that sounds like a big job. So it's my job to show everybody today that it's actually a pretty easy job, and that the work you've already done in building those pieces actually is the hardest part. So we now move into the fun part of the program, which is actually building a plan and learning about a whole lot of ways that you can build plans, not only for Australia. So this is the way companies build plans and nations build plans. So we're learning a whole lot of skills here on plan building that you can use in a whole lot of other situations as well. And so over the next couple of weeks, we'll not only talk about building the plan, how you can do it, how we can all work together to assemble that plan, but also the things that you're learning. So each of the students will be learning important lessons, but it's learning by doing. So it's not me saying, you've got to learn this. It's you've already learnt it because you've already done it. So it's a fun phase now. It's the build the plan phase, and it's like the, let me see the video up front. It's the this is going to be fun. It's great when a plan comes together.
Excellent. So we get to hear about how you guys can go forward with that next step, which is very exciting. And then a little bit after that, we have some videos from Dr. Heather Robson, from James Cook University. So that will be exciting as well. And we'll have a bit of a chat about those videos after we see them. But we might get started, I reckon. So you'll see me a little bit later on, and I'm going to leave you in Ian's capable hands.
Thanks, Jessie.
Thank you.
Great. Well, let's have a think about how we actually build the plan. What we need to do is basically take all of the pieces that you've assembled in the, in your discovery summary forms and put those all together into a plan. So there's a couple of steps that we need to take to actually do that. Now the first one is an easy one, and that's really what's planned for this week, which is that we're going to go over your discovery summary forms and want you to have a look at those again and also look at what else has been loaded up onto the website. So one of the things to learn about planning is that it's fun. And it's fun because it's a team sport. It's like cricket and it's like football. Everybody contributes, but nobody wins by themselves. It's the team who wins. So what we're going to do is look at, for the first part, what other people have learnt in their regions, in their student focus areas, and you can take some of those ideas and you can build that into your plan as well. So this is all about learning from each other. So if we take biodiversity, say, Bisma has done a great job in Ecozone 8 at identifying some of the key areas that she needs to work on. But you can have a look at what Bisma has already identified, and you can learn from that, but also Bisma is able to learn from what you've done. So that if you think about it, there are 12 student focus areas, so there are 12 other people actually looking at the same area but in different zones. So this is about looking at what everybody else has put up on the website and actually starting to assemble that into your student focus area and your discovery summary form. So just spend a few minutes this week, maybe a little bit longer if you like, just looking at what other people have done, and feel free to update your discovery summary form to include any other ideas that you would like to. So that's the first step, and that's a pretty easy one. That's really important because what we're going to do next to build the plan is just like a jigsaw puzzle. So you've done the most important part, which is build the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. And a good plan is just simply assembling all of those pieces so that they fit together well. Now that is all business planning is about. And we're going to go through the first stage of that process over the next 6 weeks in building the plan. So let me explain how we're going to do that. We're going to, and there's a couple of steps in this, one of which we've looked at, which is review. Now the second part to have a look at is the fact that each of the areas in your student focus areas, so you'll notice that one of the student focus areas is clean energy, another one is climate change. But guess what? They're a bit interrelated. So if we address clean energy, we're actually helping climate change. So what we want you to do, having reviewed your discovery summary forms, updated those if you need to, is then just have a think about all of the other areas in the Sustainable Development Goals and how they might relate to your particular area. Because one of the great things about business planning and bringing it all together into a single plan is often as we solve one problem, we're actually solving part of another one. And as we solve 2 or 3 problems, we're actually solving 2 or 3 others. And that's really the amazing thing about pulling a plan together, that we identify where the challenges are, we start to work out solutions to those challenges, and then we start to assemble it all. And once we've assembled it, it actually starts to be a much bigger solution than just the individual pieces. So that's what we'll be doing over the next couple of weeks. Now the third piece, once you've started to check on the interconnectivities, and the way we're going to get you to do that is fairly simple. You all would have done the questionnaires right at the beginning, so you know how they work. They're not that complicated. They probably took a little bit of time in the beginning, but we're going to get you to go back and just run through those again, answer those again, because that will just take your mind back to all of the areas, and you'll be able to use that as a little bit of a refresh. Yeah, look, there's areas in poverty. Does that relate to climate change? It actually does. So I'll be interested in seeing if you pick that up. So we're going to get you to do the questionnaires again. That should take about 30 minutes. It'll be fast this time because you already know it. There's no trick questions. We haven't changed them at all. Exactly the same questionnaires, but that will get you familiar with the bigger picture. And you'll notice the third questionnaire is actually about visioning. It's about thinking about what we want the future to look like and what you'd like the future to look like. Now, that again is to get you thinking that through, because in the third step, we're going to get you to start thinking about a vision for your student focus areas. If everything worked really well in terms of your objectives, what would that actually look like? Now, vision sounds like a complicated word. Why is a vision important? Well, it's all about thinking, what do I want the future to look like? And I'll give you 2 examples of how vision makes a really big difference. You probably know about Steve Jobs and Apple. Now, he in the beginning just had a vision for building great products. That's what his vision was. He had to translate that into a whole lot of objectives and strategies and corporate ways of doing that. But the important thing is he had that vision of building great products. And he was able to take that and get everybody around him enthusiastic and excited about that. And guess what? Apple built great products. We now have the iPhone and the iPad and all of the iComputers, and we have great products. And in lots of ways, iTunes, that's actually changed the way we do things in the world, because one person had a great vision and was able to work with a team of people to actually make that happen. So that's why vision's important. Let's look at another example of that. Elon Musk, who looks after the Tesla car, the electric car in America. Now, he looks after it because he's the CEO of the company. He had a vision for building a great electric car. Well, that's pretty exciting. But guess what happened? He then pulled together a team, and they built not only the best electric car, but when the Model S came out in 2012, it not only won the awards for best electric car, it won the awards for the best car all round. But that wasn't just an idea of being able to get the wheels working with the engine, which was electric, and the battery power. It was all about Elon's vision of a fantastic car and then translating that into how we're going to make that happen. So that third phase or third step will be you looking at what's your vision of what your student focus area would look like if we're successful in your ecozone, and make that happen. Now, we are going to be successful, so you're really designing the future with this. So we're visioning the future so that we can get there. Now, the fourth stage is where we're going to take that vision and we're going to build a plan for the important parts from your discovery summary forms. So you've identified a lot of areas in your discovery forms that we could tackle. But what you'll find with most things in life is there's the really important ones and there's the really urgent ones. So we're going to prioritize those so that we can focus and focus. Now, you'll learn one thing when you work on business planning is that if you can focus, then it makes your job a lot easier. So if you try and do everything at the same time, that makes life a little bit difficult. However, if we can focus on the important parts of your discovery summary form, then we can make that happen. And we're going to use a very simple rule here called the 80-20 rule. You might have heard of that. And we're going to pick the top 4 priorities from your discovery form. And the way we do that is you had to rate each of those areas on between 1 and 10 for importance and urgency. And we're going to add those 2 up, and guess what? You'll get a score out of 20, and the top scores, we're going to take the top 4 of those. And if we go to business discovery form, she was looking at biodiversity, and guess what she had on top? 19 out of 20, conserving endangered species. So what we will do with that is then look at how we could take that and say, well, what are our objectives there? What are our strategies? How are we going to action that? And how are we going to measure whether we actually achieve that? So that's going to be the building the plan phase, and we're going to have Dr. Heather Robson talk about how the universities can help you actually take those top 4 and translate it into the plan, because that's the major part of what we're doing over the next 6 weeks. So you've got plenty of time to do that. You've got each other to throw in ideas, and you'll have the support of the full Plan for the Planet team, as well as your regional university to do that. The next stage we're going to do is have a little bit of a look at the lessons you've learnt, and then finally, to end up the next 6 weeks, we're going to take each of your individual plans and we're going to simply bring them all together. And what we will have then is a sustainable development plan for your ecozone. Now that might sound like a bit of a complicated process, and we've got a bit of a diagram here that might show you a little bit of how it all fits together. Might go on to the next one if we can. Oh, well, that shows you how it all sort of, yeah, this one here. This one shows you how each of the components fit together. So you can see all of your student discovery forms over on the left-hand side. We take those, we prioritize using that 80-20 rule. We then translate those as it moves into the yellow phase into objectives, strategies, actions and measures. And then you'll see we combine those, and then we move to the point where we take each of the 20 ecozone plans, we do something called synthesize those, so we'll all work together on that. We'll find out all the common themes and we build that into the national plan, and that's what we present, Jesse, when we talk to the people in Canberra about how we're going to make this happen and how they can support us. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next 6 weeks. It's the exciting part of this. And as I said, most of the hard work's done.
So it's crunch time. It's putting it all together.
It's
and
putting it all
working
together
to make our plan.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. I have a couple of questions
Yeah,
about
fire away.
what you've just said, though. Firstly, with the prioritising the different things, the top 4 and rating them and everything, what happens if the students are having trouble working out how to prioritise, what's important, what's urgent? Do you have any tips for how they might sort of decide which things are more important than other things?
Well, this is the great part, Jessie, about working in a team. So if you're not sure, why don't you pull some of the other team members around and just say, look, I've got, because I looked at BISMAS, and BISMA had a couple of areas that were actually 19. So we need to choose 4, that's really important. But if you just talk to the rest of the team and say, look, I've got these areas, which ones out of all of the ones I've identified here are the top 4, makes it easy. It's a bit of fun.
Bit of teamwork.
Bit of teamwork, a bit of fun, and it's important now because good planning is about great teamwork, and that's why we spent all the time up front building the team.
Excellent. And can they also ask other areas what they might be prioritising and why, to sort of get some ideas to help them out with that as well?
Look, absolutely, and it's not restricted to your team at your school. So there's probably other students who aren't involved in this who you could ask. There's your parents, your friends. So this is about a bigger team than even our small team. So we've got teams right across Australia, but you've got a whole lot of networks, and networks are an important way of building plans as well.
Excellent.
And prioritising.
And I suppose those priorities would change across the different eco-zones as well. What's important for one might be a little bit less important for a different one, or less urgent or something like that.
It's a really important point, because what we'll find is there's a lot of similarities between the eco-zones, but there's some important differences. So that's going to be the next stage after our build stage, where we synthesize all of the plans and we start to bring that together, and we'll find a lot of commonalities, but we'll find some really important distinctions as well. And that's why we have at the end of this a plan for each ecozone, so that it's unique, and so we can implement that for each zone, but we'll also combine that into a national plan so that we all know what's happening overall as well.
How fantastic. Now, I have another question. So what happens if, when they're sort of putting their vision together, what happens if fixing one challenge might cause some challenges in a different area? Do you have any tips or advice to do with that?
What we find is, if you think about the impacts on other areas, that usually is most of the solution. So there's a couple of interesting things. One is we've prioritised and we've said we're going to pick the top 4. Now that helps us focus, but there's a really interesting thing about the 80-20 rule, is that if you fix the top 20%, the most important and urgent issues, often you're fixing 80% of the problem. It's really interesting. So there's a few little cute rules that you're going to be learning here. And it's like anything. If you're going skiing, what are the most important things you need to do? Well, you need to take your skis, probably some money. You need to work out how you're going to get there and how you're going to get up the mountains. That's your ski pass. And how you're going to sleep at night. So somewhere to stay. So there's 5 things there. Now there's a whole lot of other things you need to think about. But if you get those 5 things right, then you're going to have a great holiday and everything else will fall into place. And it's a bit the same with this. If we focus on those top 4, we're probably going to hit 80% of the issues.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's relieving. Now, what about, I mean, we've just seen that complicated diagram that you've helped make a bit more simple for us, but what happens if some of the students are feeling a little bit overwhelmed about the challenge ahead of them of sorting it all out? Do you have any tips about how they might approach it?
Sure do. Good question, Jess. So what we have is Dr. Heather Robson now coming to talk to us from James Cook University. Now we have a regional university supporting each of the schools, and those teams can come in and actually help you if there's any areas of particularly the translating things into strategies and objectives and actions and measures. That all sounds a bit overwhelming sometimes, but it's not. It's actually really simple. So, you know, if I take your ski pass, well, what's your objective there? Well, you need a ski pass, don't you? And what's your strategy? You go down the shop and buy it. Who's going to do that? Well, probably mum and dad. So you make sure mum and dad have done it. How are you going to know whether you've got it? What's your measure? Well, I've got it in my pocket. So it actually is as simple as that, but you don't have to do that yourself. That's where the university can come in. And that's why we've got Dr. Heather Robertson today, who's going to come and join us via video and explain a couple of important things. And I'm just going to, we've got it broken into 3 sections so we can ask questions. The first one is about why each of the schools and what they're doing is important. Yep. The second
I'm really
part
excited to be talking to you.
is how to maximise the impact of the plan. And the third is how the university can help.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So why don't we have a listen to Dr. Robertson, and then we can you know, have a few questions about that as well.
Wonderful. Well, let's have a look at the video.
Welcome to part 2. In part 2, I'm really excited to be talking to you today. So whether you're a high school student from Pimlico State High School or another one of the high schools in the Plan for the Planet program, there are 3 things that I'd like to share with you today that will hopefully help you maximize your experience here with Plan for the Planet. So let's go ahead and get started. So the 3 things I wanted to share with you today. The first one is, why is your plan from the high school in the tropics so important? So if you are like Pimlico and you actually live in the tropics, why is your plan so important? And the second one is, how do you maximize the impact of your plan? So once you've worked with your fellow high school students to put together this plan and other resources, how do you actually make sure that it makes the biggest impact in the Plan for the Planet program? And then the last thing that I'd like you to do is talk to you about how we as a university can help you find resources to answer the questions that you're trying to answer. So, part 1, why is your plan so important? Your location at either Pimlico or another high school in the tropics is critical. And the reason why this is critical is because your recommendations are transferable to a very important region, which is the tropics. So let's explore some of the concepts behind that. The tropics, as you know, is that colorful sort of band there in the middle, and currently more than 40% of the world's population is living in the tropics, and that proportion is actually growing. In fact, by the year 2050, 67% of the world's children will reside in the tropics. It's pretty exciting. And around 80% of the world's biodiversity will also be found in that band. And also specifically, 95% of the mangrove and coral reef-based ecosystems are also found within that region. So we're facing some of the most critical issues of our time with this expanding population and these biodiversity habitats around health and disease, environment, biosecurity, governance, economics, social issues, and much, much more. So if you take a look at this table or graph here, you can see that Australia in particular has that whole part in the top that's green, landmass in the tropics. And Queensland and Australia have major scientific assets that have been dedicated to tropical science in both in terms of knowledge and scientific resources and innovations in this region. So I'd like you to consider that populations in the tropics are urbanized, and this urbanization is actually growing at a faster rate than the rest of the world. We also know that there's a new global dynamic that will be shaping our world in the next 20 years. And if you have time, it might be really interesting to take a read of the CSIRO's megatrends, which talk about the 6 largest social, economic, and environmental trends that they see impacting Australia specifically and the world in the next 20 years. So I can't go into it now, but it might be kind of something interesting for you to read later. And while there have been rapid improvements in some areas in the tropics, there are still other areas like life expectancy and economic output per capita that still show that the tropics are lagging behind other areas in the rest of the parts of the world. So what we can see is that this region is at a really critical juncture, and that the resources required to sustain a larger population and economic growth are putting significant increasing pressures on our natural environment and biodiversity. Poverty is still an issue for many countries within our region. Many nations suffer from poor health and educational disparity. There's significant investment in infrastructure that's needed in many nations, and in some cases, both political and economic instability and poor governance are major constraints that are limiting development in the tropical regions. So, if you're a student at Pimlico, you'll see that we actually reside in Ecozone 9. But what I want you to think about, whether you're at Pimlico or any other high school, is what are the ecosystems and what are the habitats that are also at play in your region within the tropics. So you can see that in many parts of the world we have a lot of these ecosystems, and in ours specifically we have amazing reefs and rainforest, outbacks, mangrove systems. So when you're putting together your plan, I'd like you to think about those ecosystems in particular and how they relate to your particular area. So let's go ahead and get started on part 2.
Such useful advice there from Heather, but I did notice, Ian, that she was talking a lot about the tropical regions, but Australia is such a big place. We have many other regions around, don't we?
We sure do, Jessie, and that's why Australia is so important as the pilot project, because Heather, as you mentioned, has talked about the tropics, and the tropics actually cover not only Pimlico, but also Darwin, Northern Territory, and Northern Western Australia. So the topics cover quite a number of schools as well. But because of the size of Australia, each of the other regions, just as the tropics are quite unique, actually are quite representative of other regions in the world. So the reason we decided to divide Australia into 20 is because each of your regions that you're looking at are quite unique. And so just as Heather has mentioned, the Northern Tropics region, the regions around Melbourne and Victoria, Tasmania is also linking into Antarctica, which is obviously a very unique area. South Australia is very unique. New South Wales has a very interesting blend of tropics and the Back of Burke areas. So what we have is a very representative, range of regions. So every region, every ecozone is equally important. Heather was just really explaining the specific significance of the tropics.
We're so lucky to have such a range of arid regions and temperate regions and even alpine regions here in Australia. So I'm excited to see what some of the students come up with their specific locations. But I think we should check out the next video from Heather.
Absolutely. I love this.
Welcome to part 2. In part 2, I'd like to talk to you about how we want to maximize the impact of your plan. In this section, I'd like to talk to you about 2 case studies in particular. The first one is about a boy named Felix from Germany, and the second one is a case study by Jason Clay from the World Wildlife Fund. So let's start with Felix. I'm not sure if you've been following social media, but if you have, a few weeks ago, National Geographic ran a story with the title, "Teenager on Track to Plant a Trillion Trees," and it's all about a boy named Felix Finkbeiner from Germany. Felix was actually interviewed, and in one of the interviews he said, "We as children understand that we cannot trust that adults alone will save our future. We have to take our future in our own hands." So I want to tell you a little bit about Felix's story, just so you can understand the potential that you also have as a high school student in making a change in the world. So in 2007, Felix was given a school assignment. He was in the 4th grade, 9 years old. Felix's favorite animal at the time, as I am told, were polar bears. So he began to investigate what sorts of things were impacting on polar bears, and in particular climate change. And as he went through, he discovered the work of a woman in Kenya who actually went through and won a Nobel Prize for planting trees. So in Felix's assignment, he decided, I can do something like that, and he challenged Germany to plant 1 million trees in the country. Fast forward to 2011. Felix's story and inspirations caught hold. He's in front of the United Nations giving a speech at the age of 13. Germany has already accomplished its goal and planted 1 million trees. Felix has launched his environmental movement called Plant for the Planet. They've designed a website, and they have a full-time employee. The United Nations has handed over stewardship of its billion-dollar tree campaign to the group. Fast forward again to 2017, Felix is now 19, and he's being heralded or revealed as one of the world's top 20 most influential environmentalist and green power activists. 14 billion trees have been planted in 130 different nations. And now there's a new goal, 1 trillion trees, which is about 150 for every person on Earth. So, why am I telling you about Felix? I think it's important to understand Felix was not a freak of nature. A lot of students, when they see these sorts of things, go, oh, well, he's really different than me. I can't do something like that. Felix was inspirational and is inspirational and articulate and very good at both. But what he was proposing is not rocket science. He had a passion and a drive. But the most important thing, and this is the thing that I'd ask you to do when you put your plans together, he called people to action, to do something. He wanted them to do something. So many of the students that I've been working with here at Pimlico, I've been working with some of you since prep, grade 1, grade 2. I know that there are ones amongst you that are just as smart, just as inspiring. You are amazing speakers and grand thinkers. So what I want you to imagine as you go through this part now is imagine what your recommendations can do if you implement them at scale. So I'd like you to concentrate on the whole package. In most cases, a lot of the information that you're getting for your plan, your information and your data, it's not novel, but your recommendations and your call to action might be new. Can you think, as you're putting all of these things together, can you think about problems in a new way? Can you clearly communicate and articulate your message? So once you have this plan, how do we actually communicate that and get that out there to the world? Okay, so fast forward to the next case study. I'd like to introduce you to Jason Clay. Jason Clay is the Senior Vice President of Markets and Foods at World Wildlife Fund, but he's also my uncle, and one of the nice things about this is I often get to chat to him about many things around conservation that I've been thinking about, and he's really changed my thinking about how to maximize your impact. And so he often challenges me to think about our goal in the future is to figure out how to produce more with less land, less water, less pollution. So we're not the only species left on the planet. And a lot of the talks that we've had have been really good, and they have really changed my thinking around things. But in case you don't get to see him on a one-on-one basis, he gave a TED Talk in 2010, which I think captures a lot of the essence of these things that redefine my thinking. And the talk was actually called How Big Brands Can Help Save Biodiversity. So in this talk, he stresses that we only have a finite amount of time, money, and resources. And with that, we need to really think about how do we make the biggest impact to help save the planet. So a lot of these huge pressing environmental issues are coming upon us very quickly, and we need to take action now. So how do we do that? We need to make sure that we're controlling the where, the what, and the who. And I'm just going to give you one of the examples that he gave in his talk here. So consumers, when they go to the supermarket, on average, spend a couple seconds making a decision to purchase a product. So how do we make sure when they're making that purchase that they're thinking about companies and products that have, sustainable processes and sustainable supply chains? How do we get to each and every consumer? If you think of a country like China, that would be a lot of effort to go and try to change the minds of every single person before they made a purchase. So I want to talk to you a moment about Cargill. Cargill is a company that controls 20 to 25% of the global market of palm oil. And if you look at that graph really quickly, I don't expect you to be able to see the numbers, but China is the top country with the largest red band across. So they have a really large amount of palm oil they import into the country. So Cargill and one other company shipped 50% of the palm oil to China. So if we can get this one company and this other company to change the supply chain and the palm oil that's going into China and make it sustainably sourced, then all of the palm oil going into China would be sustainable. So instead of on a single one-by-one basis trying to change the mind of the individual consumer, you can, by changing one company, you can in fact change the entire market. So in the rest of his talk, he talks about the 35 regions in the world that are really important to protect biodiversity. And if you watched my first talk about the tropics, you'll see that many of these regions actually fall within that area, which is really nice. There's also a really interesting analysis of the 15 commodities that are actually having the largest negative impact on biodiversity in the world, and some of the 100 companies that you might be able to work with to sort of change and turn around these sorts of things. So this concept around changing the mind of a consumer versus changing the mind of a company in the market, this was a really aha or eureka moment for me. So it really, for me, it made me think that I could work really, really hard on both of these two things. But if you put your effort into something, where you put your effort really matters the impact that you're going to have if you want to make changes on an environmental scale very quickly. So each of you in your Plan for the Planet program have a particular focus area that you're working on. It might be poverty, it might be biodiversity, it might be something else. So your where is defined by where you live and where your high school is. So that's already defined for you. So that's one less decision you have to make. I'd really like you to think about your what. So what is causing the greatest impact on your particular focus area in your region? And then how do you best target your who that will maximize the impact? So if you can draw it back to those two case studies, how do you actually do that? So one final section left, part 3, and I'll tell you in that section how to go through and find some resources that are available here for you in the region. Thanks.
Wow, what useful advice there from Heather. And isn't Felix's story amazing? You know, Ian, I think the thing that really inspires me about Felix's story is that he's had such a huge global change from just being just an average kid, like, you know, I was once.
I think we all were.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think the point that Heather made, which was often you see these things happening in the world and you think these people are exceptional people. Felix is an exceptional guy, but I think what Heather was saying, which was just so important, and that's where I think we really should finish today because we've gone a little bit over time, and we can have a look at Heather's last video on bringing in the other resources. Why don't we have another session in a week or two, or maybe 2 weeks' time?
2 weeks' time.
When we're starting to do the build, and then that's really where the universities can come in and assist, and we can have Heather talking about that, and then let me see, and we can talk a little bit more about that in the session as well. But I think the best place to finish today is really just recapping on what Felix has done and Heather's point that Felix is no more exceptional than any student who's actually working on this program. Everybody out there, and I know this because I'm seeing all the results coming in, I've got to go out and meet quite a few students, and I'm going to be in the next couple of weeks. I've met all the students, and everybody out there is just as capable as Felix. And just imagine if we had the 250 students who are involved in this program doing great things in the same way as Felix, which is what we're going to have. And guess what? Felix is doing one area, which is the planting the trees. Now that's really important. What we're doing is covering all of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we're not only coming up with good ideas on how to make a difference, but we're actually pulling those all together in how that actually creates a plan to make a big difference longer term. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty excited about hearing about Felix, and we can just recap on what the students need to do for this next stage over the next couple of weeks. One, just have a think about your discovery summary form. See if you want to tweak it, having seen today. Refresh, do the questionnaires again, just so you've got that big picture in your mind and that sense of visioning. Build your vision, build the plan, and we'll have the session in 2 weeks' time where we can talk a little bit more about that. Then we're going to have towards the end of May a session on what we've learnt, and finally we'll be bringing it all together. So we've got an exciting 6 weeks coming up. We've got the inspiration of Felix, and we've got 250 students around Australia who are all set to go on this.
Excellent, and some universities who are going to help us along the way.
Exactly.
So, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. That wraps up the end of our session, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Good luck with all of your plans.
Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody.
I wanna see dollars, I wanna see pounds, I wanna see dollars, I wanna see